What's up everybody, Dynasty Heisman here, and in today's video I want to go over one of the more interesting and new features in EA Sports College Football 25, and that is NIL. Now, along with the transfer portal, NIL is the other big feature in this game that I am super curious to see how EA implements it into the game. There are so many different directions EA can go with this that I honestly have no idea what they'll do or even what's best for us players, to be honest with you. I mentioned at the end of my transfer portal video that I think this is going to be something that will be far from perfect in year one. It will take EA a couple of years to figure out how to perfect it. And I think the same thing can be said for NIL. I think it's going to take EA a couple of years just to kind of, tune some things, change some settings around to really get it where a majority of the player base is going to be enjoying it. Now, let's start with what I really don't want NIL to look like in EA CFB 25, and these aren't really in any particular order. Starting off, number one, I don't want to have to worry about NIL week to week during the season. Now, we can put an asterisk next to this one as I kind of more mean this outside of recruiting. Again, depending on how EA decides to implement NIL in the game, you might have to deal with it during recruiting, which kind of makes sense. But at that point, you really can't avoid it in the season. But in terms of guys on your roster or players who may transfer from another school, I don't really want to worry about NIL during the season. Which leads to number two. Speaking of recruiting, I don't want it to be the main driver in how you get players. I know that may not be super realistic, especially for certain guys out there, but I don't want recruiting to essentially be free agency. At most, I think it would be best to give recruits a certain minimum amount that they would accept. And if you can't give that recruit that amount, or I guess if you just choose not to, then you just won't get them at all. Plain and simple. And lastly, number three, I don't want to have to worry about where my NIL money comes from. In real life, there's dozens of ways a school obtains NIL money through different collectives, boosters, alumni, fan donations. But for video game purposes, let's keep it simple. Just get all your NIL money from one source. No need to overcomplicate it. Call it your school's collective. Call it whatever you want, but just keep it from one source. Let's just keep it simple and move on. Now, here are some things I'd like to see EA implement with NIL. Number one, again, these are really in no particular order, but have a tiered system where smaller schools cannot have as much NIL money as the larger schools, no matter what. Can't emphasize that last part enough. If you like to build up a smaller school in your dynasty like I do, you should not be able to work your way up to having as much NIL money as, say, in Alabama. If you are playing at Central Michigan and you win natty after natty, I still don't think you should ever reach a level where you have as much NIL money as the Blue Bloods. No offense, fire up chips. I do think you should be able to increase the amount of NIL money you have as a smaller school, but there has to come a point where it stops. I'm sorry, Central Michigan could win the national championship next year. They're not, they'll get a boost in NIL money, but it won't be enough to catch the Blue Bloods. Next, number two, find a way so that there isn't so much variation in what players are paid in NIL money. Now, what I mean by that is, say you're recruiting, all 5-star players should get paid like $1 million to $2 million, right? Somewhere in that range. Then all 4-star players should get paid, say, $700,000 to $800,000. This will just help keep things simple. Instead of anyone being paid like anywhere between like $1,000 and $50 million, right? Because then you just have a roster of 75 dudes who are just, they're all getting paid different amount. Like, try to, kind of group the players together more, categorize them more. And again, I think this will just help keep it simple. It'll just help kind of move things along when you're playing your dynasty. And lastly, this is more of a broad overall point. Make this simple. Like, really don't overcomplicate this. I know EA wants to try and make this game as real as possible, and I can respect that, but you just can't really do that with NIL because in reality, it's just like the Wild West. Like, this is a video game, and simplicity really matters. I also think there should be a setting to turn NIL off, to be honest with you, because some people just aren't going to want to deal with it, and I can kind of understand that. I mean, it's almost like how some people turn like salary cap off in Madden, right? Like, some people play that way, and like, that's not for me, but I know it's for some people. So I think there should be a setting to just turn this off. But that's why I would just try to make this as minimal as possible during the season. Just basically make it like a recruiting thing. If they make this something where each offseason you have to essentially renegotiate with half your roster or they're going to transfer, that's like 40 players. Like you have to quote unquote re-sign plus recruit. Like, no, thank you. I don't want to do that. I mean, like I've seen tons of comments from people saying they didn't even like recruiting in the old games because it took too long. Which, look, I disagree with that. I don't think it took that long, but that's another discussion, right? Like, I just hope EA keeps it simple with this. I know they want again. I know they want to try to make it like realistic, but just keep it simple. To me, that's the best advice. That's it for today's video. Let me know in the comments section what you guys think. What do you want NIL to look like in EA Sports College Football 25? Make sure to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you in the next video.